Hi everyone, welcome back to Kidding Around. My name is Melanie Smith and I am so excited that you are here with me today to talk about another wonderful woman. Today we will be talking about the amazing Harriet Tubman. Before we do that though, if you like what you're seeing here and want to follow along with all of Kidding Around's videos, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also if you really like what we're doing here, please share us with your friends. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to talking about Harriet Tubman. You may already have heard of her. She was a slave back in the 1800s when slavery was an accepted practice in the United States. She escaped slavery and then returned back to the South, where slavery was still legal, 13 times to help at least 70 more people escape slavery. She was a very brave and courageous woman and risked her safety and her life every single time she went back to the South to help others escape slavery just like she had. The way that she helped people escape slavery was by using the Underground Railroad. And though it sounds like it's a train that runs underground, it actually isn't. The Underground Railroad was comprised of people who lived in the South who were sympathetic to the slaves' plight, and they allowed slaves, escaping slaves, to use their houses and their barns for cover as they traveled from the South to the North. Even though escaping slaves had the help of the people who lived in these houses in the South that were on the Underground Railroad, it was still a very dangerous and treacherous journey. If any of these slaves were caught, they could be forcibly returned to their slave owners or even put to death. Most of Harriet Tubman's journeys took place in the nighttime hours in the winter. So nighttime hours provided Harriet Tubman and her traveling companions the cover of darkness as they moved from one place on the Underground Railroad to the next place. And they traveled during the winter because the winter hours of darkness are longer than the summer hours of darkness. So they could travel a longer distance each day. I'm sure that you can imagine as they traveled, they were not only scared, but they were also probably very cold and wet at times as well. When the Civil War began, Harriet Tubman worked for the Union Army, first as a nurse and a cook, and then later on as a scout and a spy. After the war was over and she was no longer in danger of being returned to the South as a slave, she took up the cause of women's suffrage, and she worked very hard to help women earn the right to vote. Harriet Tubman was an amazing woman. She was born into some of the worst circumstances that anyone could be born into. And we're not going to go into detail today about the circumstances that caused her to want to leave slavery. But I hope as you get older, you go and you read her accounts, and you read the accounts of other slaves, those accounts that we have at least. It's a very important part of our history. It's a terrible part of our history, but it's an important part of our history. It's important for us to read it and to understand it so that we don't repeat it. But anyway, today we are going to celebrate what an amazing woman Harriet Tubman was, how brave she was, how courageous she was in escaping slavery and then returning 13 times to help so many people escape that horrible, horrible reality. And we are going to make this lantern reminiscent of the lantern that she might have carried as she helped people escape on that Underground Railroad. So to do this craft, you will need a few supplies. You will need some white construction paper, just one piece. You will need some black construction paper. You'll need more than one piece, but less than two. So you can see here I have one full piece and then I have another piece that I used for another project. And this will be more than plenty. You will need some watercolors. You will need a pair of scissors, some water for your watercolors, and a paintbrush too, and then also a pencil. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I am going to do is I am going to make the background of my lantern. And to do that, I am going to take my white piece of construction paper and I'm going to make one cut, and then I will have this rectangle that works very well to paint and make that candle glow on my background. So I have my white paper and I'm going to cut just right about there. It'll make a rectangle. Yours doesn't have to be exactly the same size or the same shape as mine, and of course this cut doesn't have to be perfect, but you're looking for something about this shape, about this size, and this will be, again, the background of your lantern. Then I am going to make the back part, the black part of the lantern, the part that you hold. And so to do that, I am going to line up this white piece of paper that I just cut, this big white rectangle, and I am going to align the two corners, well, the corner of the white with the corner of the black, just like that. And then I am going to cut this strip off of the backing of my lantern. So I'm just cutting this little strip off. All right, and then I am going to fold this big piece of black paper that I have in half. So I am now going to make the part of the lantern that you would hold, just like that. So I'm folding it, and then I am going to draw these little stair steps. So I'm going to be able to draw these and then cut once, and then I'll have both sides. So I'm going to make sure that the fold is not the part where I start my stair steps. So I am going to start my stair steps on the open part of the black paper. And what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to line up the bottom of my white paper with the bottom of the black paper. This is just to give me a reference as to where to start my stair steps. And then right at the top of that white paper, I am going to start drawing stair steps. Maybe I'll put this over here a little bit so you can see it a little easier. So again, remember, I'm drawing on the open side of my black folded paper, and I'm going to start just right where this white paper ends. So I'm going to draw a line across. At that point, I can get rid of the white paper for now. I don't need it. I just needed it as my starting point. So I draw across, and then I'm going to draw stairs. So up and over, and up and over, and up and over, and up and over. And then when I get to about an inch-ish away from the top of the black paper, I am going to draw a circular line, or at least the start of a circle. So you can imagine how this goes around and becomes a circle. You won't be able to complete the whole circle, but this will be the part that someone would hold on the lantern. Oh, let's put Harriet back there. There we go. All right, and then in this circular part, I am going to come across to the fold, and I am going to draw a half oval in that area where I have drawn the circle. So here's kind of like an imaginary line at the top of my stairs. I drew my partially circular line, and then I'm going to, in that area, draw an oval. This will make the part that you actually can hold. It'll make sense as we cut it out. So then I'm going to take my scissors and cut along these lines that I just drew. So right now I am cutting my stair steps up and over. All right, and then I am going to cut on that circular part. I'm going to make that just a little bit more circular. And then I'm going to come over onto the other side and cut out that half oval. And then we're going to open it up. Oh no, runaway pencil. And then we're going to open it up, and there you go. You can see now how you would hold the lantern. Okay, so now I am going to go ahead and glue on the white part, the background part of my art. So I'm just taking my glue stick, and I think I'm just now realizing that I didn't tell you you needed a glue stick for this project. You do need a glue stick. It had rolled off of my table, so I didn't think to tell you that, but it's listed in the supply list below. So if you went with that, you're good. If not, go grab a glue stick. All right, and then I am just putting this down on my black paper. It should pretty well cover the under part of your staircase of your black paper. And then we are going to go ahead and paint on, we'll draw on and then paint on our candle. So you can see here that this white part, this candle, is just the part that I didn't paint. So I am going to draw that part in now. So I'm going to draw a rectangle. Of course, in Harriet Tubman's time, they would not have been carrying electric lanterns. They definitely would have had to have carried lanterns at some point to be able to see in the dark overnight as they were moving from place to place. But they would need candles to do that. So this is our candle, and then I am going to go ahead and draw a flame as well. Just like that. And now we're going to add some color. So the flame, we are going to make yellow with our watercolor. So I have my paintbrush. I dip it in the water first. With watercolors, you go to the water first and then you go to the paint. So I dip it in the yellow, and then I am going to paint that flame yellow. But of course, light would come off of that flame as well. So we're going to continue on with our rays of light. And the flame is yellow, but the light would change a little bit as you got past the immediate flame. So now I'm going to put my orange right next to the flame of the yellow. Now the really cool thing about using watercolors is that they blend very well, and so they actually look more realistic in a situation like this. So if you get a little yellow in your orange or a little orange in your yellow, that is totally cool, because that is truly more of what it would actually look like. It's more realistic. So I am painting orange around the flame. You can see the flame is bleeding. That's totally cool with me. And I am just kind of painting a circular or an oval type shape. Of course, then not completing that oval shape across the actual candle. And I am adding water when I need the paint to flow a little bit more, or going back to my paint if I feel that my color has gotten too watered down. All right, so you can see I have my oval shape there, and then I am going to add some red too. There would still be light out here, but it would be getting a little bit darker, so we're going to use a little bit darker color and put some red on the outside. Okay, you can see I'm just following that oval shape, but then leaving space for the candle at the bottom. And we'll continue around. Now I mentioned that watercolors blend very well. I love using watercolors because of that. And you wouldn't see a dramatic difference. You wouldn't see orange and then red. What you would actually see is just the light kind of getting darker as it went away from the flame. So I am going to now take my paintbrush and kind of go over that transition so it doesn't look quite so harsh and it looks a little bit more realistic. So I'll just kind of mix these two, red and orange, and I added some orange to my brush to make that transition just a little bit softer. Okay, so that looks great to me. Of course, you keep doing yours until it gets to the point that you are happy with it. I like this light. You know, I do like this light, but I also think that I want a little bit more color. I'm not going to let this be so white, so I'm just going to add a little bit more red. You keep playing with yours until you like the way it looks. You can keep that. I love painting like this. It really does feel like just playing with it until you get it perfect. All right. So now I am happy with it now. Now I'm going to set it aside and let it dry. Okay, so now we look at this lantern and we realize that there are some bars across it as well. So what these bars would do, if this were a real lantern, is they would hold glass in place that would keep the wind from taking the light or the flame off the candle and from blowing it out. So we are going to make those bars as well. So what I'm going to do is I have this piece of black that I cut off my lantern piece. And I am going to cut it into 4 strips. So the way that I do that is I am going to cut it in half, cut it directly in half, and then I will have 2 strips. And then I'm going to cut each of these 2 strips into 2 smaller strips. So now I am doing that. And you can tell, I'm sure, that these are not perfectly straight. They're close to straight, but they do not have to be perfect by any means. All right, and it takes a little bit of practice to be able to cut a long straight line like this. Just keep working at it. You will get it. If you wanted to draw the line before you cut it, you absolutely could do that. I will tell you what really helps me cut a straight-ish line is I just try to make sure that when I'm cutting this piece, like if it were right there, as I'm cutting, I keep my eye out to make sure that the space between my scissors and the space between the edge of this side of the piece stays the same all the way down. And that just helps me keep it kind of straight. Anyway, like I said, practice really helps with this skill. So work at it and draw your line if you want to too. Okay, so these are going to be the 4 strips that I use for the outside of my lantern. So now I am going to just use my lantern as a measurement tool. So I make sure that I have the corners lined up over here, and then at the edge of the white, I just snip it off. Then I'm going to do that again. The top and the bottom are the same size, so I can use the bottom for to measure for both the top and the bottom bar. And again, this should be close, but it's really not something that has to be perfect. All right, and now I am going to do the same thing, but I'm going to use the long sides of the lantern, and these are going to be the edges of the lantern. All right, so I cut that off, and then I could use the same side. This time I decided to use the other side, but they should be about the same size, so you can use either side of the lantern for your cutting measurement. Okay, so now I have my 4 strips, but my paint is still wet, and I still have some more bars to cut, so I'm going to go ahead and cut those first. Now, I'm going to tell you that these lanterns came in all different types of styles. So I have a style here that kind of has these 2 bars and then these cross braces. I've also seen them where they just have a bar straight down and a bar straight across. I've also seen them where they kind of have 2 long bars and 2 shorter bars. I'm going to put some samples of these types of lanterns down linked below this video, so you can look at those and you can decide whatever design you want to make. I think that I am going to make kind of a more traditional lantern for this one, so I'm going to do a bar straight down and a bar straight across. So I'm going to take the other black that I have. Remember I said that you can use some scrap black. So I'm going to take the other black that I have, and I am going to measure it, by eyeballing it, and I will cut my bars out of this. So let's see, does this bar go straight across? Does it go long enough? I think that goes long enough that I can use that. So then I am going to cut my across bar out of this paper. I really like to be efficient with my use of paper. I use a lot of different, a lot of pieces from old construction paper, from old projects, I should say. For new projects, I have a little box and I keep all of my scraps in it. So it's really fun to be able to go through there and say, hey, I don't need to cut a brand new piece of paper. I've got a scrap that works really well. You can do that too. Use the technique that I showed you to cut the correct sizes of these bars to help you cut the correct sizes of whatever bars you want to use for the front of your lantern. So I measured, as you saw there, I measured my scrap piece of paper, and I think that's going to work really well. So now it is time to glue this down. At this point, if your if your light has not yet dried, you might want to wait a few minutes, or if you're really impatient, you can get that blow dryer out and blow dry it. I am going to go ahead and glue. Mine isn't quite dry, so it won't stick probably the best, but I think it's still going to stick well enough just to show you what to do. But I would highly recommend that you wait until your candle is completely dry. All right, so I am going to now glue my sides. So I'm just going to take my glue and I'm going to glue on the smaller piece of paper. It always helps to glue on the smaller piece of paper. And I am going to just run my bars, the bars of the lantern, just right along the edge of my white piece of paper. So there's one, and now I'm working on the second. And I'll just put that down. And then I have my top and bottom, and this comes together pretty quickly. As you can see, all of a sudden it just looks like a real lantern. Okay, now I'll do the top. And there we go. We've got it outlined. And now I'm going to put those bars on that would help keep the glass in place. And remember, yours can be any design that you want. Check the link below for some ideas. I guess, the thought of putting this one straight down the middle means I just put it right through the flame that I drew and painted. That's okay. I mean, that's kind of realistic. You would probably see a bar kind of go through that flame. But if you don't want your bar to go through your flame, then maybe you choose a different design than I just did. But anyway, so now I have completed my lantern, and I think it is something that you might see Harriet Tubman or the people she traveled with or any of the other slaves escaping slavery, you might see them carrying through the woods. I would love to see a picture of the lantern that you made. Please ask a grown-up to take a picture and put that on our Facebook site. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you love Harriet Tubman just as much as I do now. I've really enjoyed talking to you about her life and her legacy. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks so much for kidding around with me. I will see you next time.